So in this second part, we're going to look at the Middle East. Matters in Syria have calmed down an awful lot, though there is a lot of concern on the part of Israel at how the Iranians are penetrating into Syria. They want to build a corridor across from Iran across to the Mediterranean. And this is a cause of conflict between Israel and Russia at the moment. Whether Russia can control the Iranians and tell them to go home. Everything is in God's hands, and we know that there are many situations where we can't really see the answer. And when the answer does come, it comes in completely unexpected ways. But we are confident that God is in control. It is his plan and purpose that is being worked out. And we shall see just how accurate everything is. I've just slotted in as a first slide something which was on Economist last night, going back to Brexit. It was an interesting chart which they'd drawn up about the overall stance of the other nations. Two hardcore nations, France and Germany, opposed to any negotiation about Brexit. And then hardcore, mainly Catholic countries, Croatia, Belgium, Netherlands, but Romania and Bulgaria, who are termed hard. But interestingly, they put 17 in the soft category, none in the ally category. But it was just an interesting chart that came up, and reference was made this morning to this quotation by Putin that Russia interested in peace in the Golan Heights and Israel's security. So peace and security. And that's one of the things we've been looking out for. When they shall say peace and safety or security, then know that the coming of the Lord Jesus is nigh. So we press the right button. We're going to focus now on the Middle East. And we're just going to take our reading, which is just one verse. And so if you just turn to Ezekiel 38, it's just verse 13 that we want to concentrate on. We know the earlier verses describe the Gogian invasion, the assembly of nations. And the interesting thing is, when you look at the background of those nations, all bar two are what we would term Christian countries. It is very much going to be a contest between the God of the churches, who says that Israel have no part in God's plan or purpose. They blew it when they put to death their Messiah. The church has inherited the promises. And here is Israel as a witness to there is a God. God has a purpose with Israel. And the contest will be who is the true God. But we know that at the end of the section which describes the different nations and their invasion at a time when Israel is dwelling safely, that there are a group of people who are opposed to this invasion of Israel. Sheba, Dedan, the merchants of Tarshish, this is verse 13, with all the young lions thereof, shall say unto thee, Gog, art thou come to take a spoil? Hast thou gathered thy company to take a prey? To carry away silver and gold, to take away cattle and goods, to take a great spoil. And that's the end of that little section there. It seems that they're not very effective. But what is interesting to us is to tease out who Sheba and Dedan represent and who the merchants of Tarshish and the young lions, and see how that there is today, as opposed to going back a few years ago, a group of nations and people operating in this region who are friendly to Israel and would be opposed to any invasion. So that's what we're going to tease out, the meaning of this verse, and try and locate where these countries come from. So first of all, Sheba and Dedan. Now, Sister Angela's favourite phrase is, we go back to Genesis when we want to know things. And in the talks we've been listening to, we've gone back to creation, we've gone back to the Garden of Eden, we've gone back to Abraham's journey. Well, we need to go back to Genesis chapter 10 and the division of the nations to find out about these people. And we know the ark landed in Arafat, and from there the people moved outwards and populated the area. Shem generally to the south and over to the east. Japheth mainly to the north into what we call Europe, but also westward. And Ham generally down through Israel and into Africa. So Shem, Ham, and Japheth were the three sons of Noah through whom the world was populated. Now, this, highlighted in the blue, are the countries which are mentioned in Ezekiel 38 as Gog's companions. And we're not particularly looking at them, but it's useful just to plot them, as it were, and see the one exception, because that is very relevant. So of the 9 companions of Gog, 2 come from Ham, Cush and Phut, or Libya. We generally think of Cush as being Sudan, Ethiopia, and Phut as Libya. And the others are descendants from Japheth. And all his sons, bar the middle one, Javan there, are the countries which feature in Ezekiel 38. So Gomer, Magog, Persia, Tubal, Meshech, Rosh, which was Tyrus, and Togarmah, who was the grandson of Gomer. So those are the companions of Gog. So Javan, as I say, is the exception of all those sons of Japheth, who appears to be in opposition to what his brothers were doing, the latter-day brothers. And from Javan came Tarshish. We read of that in Ezekiel 38 and verse 13, which is what we just read of Tarshish. And if we go back to Genesis chapter 10, it tells us that Tarshish was descended from Japheth. So these, the Sheba and the Dedans and the Tarshish, we see on this chart here. So we have a Sheba and Dedan descended from Cush's son Raama, and we also have a Sheba descended from Shem's great-great-great-grandson Peleg and Joktan. Joktan had a son called Sheba, and Peleg, who go on to Abraham, and with Keturah, Jokshan, had a Sheba and a Dedan. So there are 2 sets of Sheba and Dedans and an odd Sheba, and we have Tarshish here. So descended from Noah. And we know that from Noah, his descendants repopulated the earth. So it is quite interesting just to plot the number of generations from Noah that these Sheba and Dedans came from, because obviously the closer you were to Noah, the more territory you had to conquer. As time went on, it got a little bit crowded, and we find that people displaced existing people. So the Sheba and Dedan there are 4 generations on, the Sheba there is 6 generations on, and the Sheba and Dedan down there are 12 generations on from Noah. That will become more relevant as we come along. So the Hamatic, descendant from Ham, his great-great-grandsons, Sheba and Dedan, we can trace them fairly carefully and accurately to the Dedan, to Bahrain, just quoting there from the Castell's Illustrated Bible Dictionary. Dedan, the place where they resided, is believed to be identical with the Dedan of Middle Ages, now called Bahrain in Arabia deserts, we would say in the Persian Gulf, an island on the western shores of the Persian Gulf. So that island there seems to be the headquarters of Dedan. And Sheba we can trace down to the south Yemen of today. And it would appear that Dedan would spread out from that island, and probably later descendants move further down the Gulf. These were trading people. They did their business with the sea, and these were good spots for trading either across to India or down with Africa. So that's the first pair of Shebas and Dedans. And we know from an earlier chapter in Ezekiel chapter 27 that the men of Dedan were thy merchants. Many isles were the merchandise of thy hand. They brought thee for a present tusks of ivory and ebony. So that links this particular Dedan, the one at the island of Bahrain, with trading with India, and bring that trade back to Bahrain, and then carrying it across to the markets of Tyre on the coast of above Israel. So that was the first pair. And then Joktan had a son, Sheba, and we learn of him as, and we trace him as coming down into the identical territory of the Hamitic Sheba, which leads to great confusion, but that's where historians put it. Now, Sheba's dad gave rise to the town of Joktan, and so we can see this was the area where they appeared, and brothers were Ophir and Havilah, so it makes sense, yes, down in this region in the south here. And they were concerned, in Ezekiel 27, it lists the kind of trade that these people were dealing with spices and all precious stones and gold. We know how Sheba, the queen of Sheba, was involved with spices. This is a good spice-growing area, as well as having an area of gold, Ophir. So, and linked with Genesis chapter 2, the river that came out. So, when we come to Abraham's grandson, Sheba and Dedan, again, his Sheba, this is now 12 generations, so this must have been a fairly well-populated area, seems to have moved down where his brothers, or not brothers, his relations had moved to earlier, and again ends up down in the south here. All the Shebas we seem to be able to trace down to this bottom region of Yemen. Dedan, Abraham's grandson Dedan, was in the north, and there's a town, Ala Ullah, where pottery has been found with graffiti, which says on the bit of pottery somebody scratched, Rabmil, son of Bashrat, camped in Dedan. So that obviously links us that that town there originally was called Dedan, and a long, long time ago this chap was stopping in Dedan and spent his time doing a bit of graffiti. We also know from Ezekiel that Teman is close to Dedan. There's Ezekiel chapter 25 talks about the God's hand being stretched upon Edom. I'll cut off man and beast from it, and I will make it desolate from Teman, and they of Dedan shall fall by the sword. Or it can be translated, they shall fall by the sword of Dedan. So whatever that is referring to, it seems to indicate that Teman and Dedan aren't very far apart, and that's what we find. And Dedan's speciality was clothes for chariots. We know there was a big trade in Egypt in chariots and horses, and so they weren't very far off from Egypt and supplied clothes that were in the chariots. How they were used, we don't know, and doesn't matter. So when we think of Sheba and Dedan, then we're very much looking at this area here, the area between the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf. These Arab peoples are very much becoming friends of Israel, as opposed to the non-Arabs up in Iran and Iraq. Quite a contrast. These are Sunni Muslims, and as time is moving on, they're appreciating the need they have for support from Israel in defeating their common enemy of Iran. So Sheba and Dedan points to this particular area there. The merchants of Tarshish, Tarshish traded with Tyre. There's a map showing where Tyre is in Ezekiel's day, and we're told that Tarshish was thy merchant by reason of the multitude of all kinds of riches. With silver, iron, tin, and lead they traded in thy fair. So in the time of Ezekiel, Tarshish was a power which traded with all sorts of things, a very general trading merchant, but had specialities in metal, silver, iron, tin, and lead. And we know, this is just reminding us where Tarshish comes from, the descendant of Japheth. We know that in the time of Ezekiel and time of the Phoenicians, that tin and lead was coming from Britain. It was a closely guarded secret from the Phoenician merchantmen. They sent their ships all the way to the farthest corners of the earth, as far as they were concerned. And it's interesting how a lot of the ancient historians, Herodotus is one of them, who knows that there is some place where this comes from, but they don't know exactly where it is. It's some closely guarded secret, because tin and lead were very valuable commodities in order to make brass and bronze, or change copper to bronze. So in the days of Ezekiel, we know that tin and lead was coming from Britain. And it's interesting, you've probably seen this many times before, this quotation from Her Majesty's book on mining activities in England, but talking about what was being mined 2,500 years ago. Lots of different metals, but lead, silver, iron, and tin up the top there were certainly being mined in southern Britain, in Cornwall and in Wales too. So that gives us a fair confidence that in the latter days there has to be a Tarshish power that is trading, that has to be there in opposition to what Gog is doing. And we have, as a community, long looked at Britain as being the latter-day trading power of Tyre or Tarshish. Now, we know the clues for Tarshish is that Javan and his sons divided up the isles of the nations, and Tarshish was one of Javan's sons. So they divided up the isles of the nations. So it would appear that they were maritime people and sought for islands where they could have ports. Josephus tells us that Tarshish emigrated to Western Europe. We know that when Jonah boarded a boat to go to Tarshish, he went to Joppa, indicating that it was to the west of Israel. Britain was the source of silver, iron, tin, and lead, to fit in with Ezekiel chapter 27. And we looked yesterday, when we looked at Isaiah chapter 23, it talks about the Tarshish Tyre power. Thine own feet shall carry her afar off. And one can trace how the naval power, when Tyre was broken, moved from place to place, eventually ending up in the 16th century, 1600s anyway, in Britain. And Britain has got young lions, and they are interested in this very region. So, only Britain fits all these clues, that it's to the west of Israel. We know that early Britons were descended from Javan, was the ancient source of these metals, and is a trading merchant power in the spirit of Tyre, and has a commonwealth, these young independent lions. And in spite of Britain running herself down and feeling a lack of confidence after the Second World War, because she'd expended so much energy in her need to join the EU, to become part of this club, yet God has seen to it that Britain has prospered, and she still is the leading merchant power and the world's largest source of international bank lending and cross-border lending, which is so important when you're doing trading with the world countries. And the members of the Baltic Exchange in London handle at some stage 2/3 of the world's open market bulk cargo. So from London, the buying and the selling, the transportation, the insurance, the loans for the people buying and selling, that's where 2/3 of the world's cargo gets handled. It doesn't get seen in Britain, but it is handled from London. And London is the world's largest market for international insurance. And in spite of the efforts of the EU to break the power of London, they hope that with Brexit that they will be able to take that crown on. That hasn't proved to be the case. Britain is getting stronger and stronger as far as that's concerned. And just an interesting website is the Maritime UK website. And this just taking the highlighted there, Britain is a match for its expertise in shipbroking, insurance and legal and financial services. More vessels are fixed through the UK ship-based shipbrokers, more capital provided via London banks and funds, more vessels insured here than in any other location in the world. English law is also applied to more shipping contracts than the law of any other country, and London has the highest concentration of solicitors, barristers and arbitrators specialising in maritime issues and dispute resolution. This range of activities means the UK can claim to be the world's maritime centre. And interestingly, part of Brexit is that Britain can set up free ports, the kind of thing that Dubai and Singapore do. And one estimate, this is from the Telegraph in June, that 150,000 jobs could be created and £9 billion added to the economy by Britain acting as a free trade area where no taxes, companies can set up, buy from other countries, manufacture, and then re-export. And that would be a very attractive situation for Britain post-Brexit, on the edge of the EU and providing the benefits for those that want to export to the EU. And just on Tuesday, the Telegraph, Liam Fox is UK can be an exporting superpower after Brexit, and he's targeting 100 billion a year leap in overseas trade as he sets about the government's new strategy to boost exports. And the Reuters account of it was quite interesting because it said that he's spent much time over the past 2 years touring the globe promoting merits of a post-Brexit Britain as a trading partner and holding preliminary talks ahead of possible future trade negotiations. Touring the globe. That's exactly what Isaiah 23 talks about, isn't it? This latter-day Tyre manifestation is of a power doing trade with all kingdoms of the world upon the face of the earth. And so we can see in a marvellous way just how spot on these things are. And so we shall see that Britain is very much involved, not only with Israel, but with the countries in this area. But she's not alone. She has young lions. And it seems a strange phrase, and in translations put villages, but it is young lions. And young lion means they're independent. They're not dependent upon the parents. They do their own thing. But when the parent calls, they come to assist. And long have young lions, and Britain as an old lion, been a favourite of the cartoonists. This goes back to World War I. And so we know that Britain has these young lions, this commonwealth of countries, America and Canada and India and Australia, New Zealand, scattered around the world. And these are countries which will come to her aid, will work with her, and are working with her in this particular Sheba Dedan region. And the British Empire is a unique one, because when it came to an end, as this account says, that out of the English Civil War came a race of Englishmen who lasted 300 years, who built the British Empire and saw it not crumble like the Roman and Spanish empires had done, but grow into separate nations, as children do when they leave the family. And that again is so expressive of the Commonwealth nations. They're independent, they're separate, but they recognise where they have come from, their roots. And this year was an important year for the Commonwealth. Every 4 years there is a Heads of Commonwealth meeting, and this year it's only the fourth time it's happened that it's been held in Britain. And so back in April time, the heads of the Commonwealth assembled in London to discuss business and to exchange links. And as this says, today the Commonwealth is a modern and dynamic network of people. Half of the top 20 emerging global cities are in the Commonwealth, and the family of nations is home to 1/3 of the world's population. Therefore, the Commonwealth is a network with huge potential. It also represents a golden opportunity for Britain as it leaves the European Union. Because English is the second language in the Commonwealth, or first or second language, and English law is the basis of Commonwealth countries, it is said for Britain to trade with a Commonwealth country, it represents a saving of 10% in the costs of doing business. So it is a big pool, and we're so thankful under the hand of God that the Queen has held together the Commonwealth. I'm sure without the Queen, the Commonwealth wouldn't be in existence today. But the Queen has steadfastly and resolutely, as the head of the Commonwealth, held it together, ready for this opportunity when it can play a big role in Britain becoming the latter-day merchant power. Now, Brother Matt Davis has written a little booklet, The Destiny of Britain Foretold in the Bible. One can purchase it from the office, but if you send me an email, I can send you a PDF copy. And he goes through all the evidence. I mean, I've been so brief, but deals with a lot more evidence than I've dealt with as to why Britain and the Commonwealth countries are the merchants of Tarshish and the young lions. So one of the problems at the moment is Sheba. All these Shebas assembled down in the south in Yemen. And yet at the moment, Yemen is not part of the friendly relations with Saudi Arabia. Far from it. There's a civil war been going on there for 3 years. And it has reached rather a climax. The problem is that the so-called rebels from the Saudi Arabia's point of view have been supported by Iran. Iran is trying to stir up trouble. Iran wants to control the narrow passageway which runs up, press the right button, runs up here. That's a choke point. And so if Iran can control that region and can control that region there, that choke point, then she has in a very strong position to dictate to the other trading nations that want to send ships through those regions. So Saudi Arabia has been battling for a long time to get rid of the rebels in Yemen. But the latest development is, and this is back in June, that the young Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia and the Abu Dhabi Crown Prince, they're very similar age, have put their heads together and forged a pact to coordinate together, and to one of the things that they're wanting to do is to free Yemen of these rebels. So they went in, they've taken the airport, they've taken part of the port, but they got bogged down. And at the moment, as far as I can see, as I was Googling last night, that there's a stalemate at the moment, and there are talks being negotiated to get the two sides to talk together. But we know, in the purpose of God, this region of Yemen has got to come under the control of Saudi Arabia and be part of this confederacy of nations who support Israel against Iran. So, let's just now look at Sheba and Dedan's relations with Israel. Britain's relations with Israel, the young lion's relations to Israel, and Britain's relations with Sheba and Dedan and the young lion. So that's a rather ambitious target to achieve in a quarter of an hour, but let's just see where we get to. So Israel and Bahrain, remember that's the original Dedan, Bahrain, they're getting on very well, and it is thought that fairly soon Bahrain will establish diplomatic relations with Israel. The ruler of Bahrain has told his people, go to Israel, they're friendly people, and Israelis are welcome, they go to Bahrain. So this is the most open of the states as to have relationships with Israel, and so significant that it was the original Dedan. Now, this Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, and the one of Abu Dhabi, as I say, they are planning to overthrow Iran from within. There is a lot of problems in Iran. The currency is tumbling through because of the sanctions which Trump has placed upon them. And so they're hoping that the Iranian people will rise up from within. And they want to also move Iraq away from Iran and remove Hezbollah and Iran from Syria. So they've got a lot of ambitious things they want to do together, but they've got the money and they've got the influence. And if this is what the angels want, this is what will happen. So we see these two regions, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, working together to try and solve the problems of the area there. This was just early in the month. It was a long article, 10-page article, and it headed Israel and the Pragmatic Sunni Camp, a historic opportunity. And the preface to this long article was, in recent years, the scope of common interests shared by Israel and the Sunni Arab camp has expanded significantly. A number of successful cooperative efforts undertaken against this background have restored the vision of normalization with the Arab world to the headlines in Israel, and have sparked public debate regarding the feasibility of this prospect. So here, much more openly, this has been going on for many years behind the scenes. Israel has had secret dealings with many of these Arab countries. It's now much more open and being talked about that there can be peace and safety in this region. If the Arabs and Israel can work together, then that would make a profound difference to the economy of Israel. The Arab is a vast market for many of the things that Israel produces. And if there can be some agreement over the Palestinians, then we shall see quite a change in this region. The Crown Prince met with senior Israeli leaders. That was back in March. They were focusing on the normalisation of ties between Israel and Saudi Arabia. That will be an incredible thing if Saudi Arabia would open embassies in Israel, Jerusalem, or Tel Aviv even. That would be a great step forward. A lot of other nations would follow suit. And Israel has the key to the ambitious plans that this chap has, and we'll come to that in a moment. We know that Israel and Jordan have restored their friendships. It got broken because of an incident that happened in 2014, but that's all been resolved. And Netanyahu paid a visit back in June, and they discussed many things. They've got many common links, Jordan and Israel. And at the moment, a pipeline is being built to take gas, Israeli gas, into Jordan to help. That's the manufacturing zone. And of course, with all the problems in Syria, Jordan is finding it difficult to bring in goods from the north, which was the traditional place where they imported. So Israel has been trucking lots of goods into Jordan on Jordan's behalf, and this pipeline is being planned to start delivering gas, I think the middle of next year. It's planned to be opened. Or the end of 2019, I see there. Jordan has been suffering economically because of all the refugees which it's been absorbing, and the difficulties, the disruption of her trade because of the Syrian war. And so the oil states have decided to step in and bail her out, and have put a lot of money into Jordan. But the interesting thing was the strings that they attached to it. They want Jordan to come into their confederation, which again is what we would expect. So these are the things that they want Jordan to do, and already the king has done quite a few of those things. So we can expect to see Jordan drawn more closely, not only with ties with Israel, but into the Saudi Arabia, dealing with those nations there. This is a report of a meeting. This is back in July in America, in the White House, which gathered together not only Jordanian intelligence leader, the Egyptian one, the Saudi one, the Israeli one, and the PA intelligence chief. All came together for a meeting in the White House. So they're heading their joint meeting. The Middle East intelligence officials last week further signalled warming relations between Israel and the moderate Arab nations. It's all happening at the moment. Now, at the moment, Abbas is the great thorn in the flesh to the Israelis because he refuses to have any negotiations. As far as he is concerned, he wants to see Israel driven completely out of the region, and it will become a Palestinian state. But pressure is being put upon him by these other nations who see that he is the stumbling block. If he could be taken out of the way, then there could be some agreement, some settlement between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and then the other Arab nations will be able to work more freely with Israel. So great pressure being put upon him. And of course, he's not this elderly gentleman with rather poor health. He has been leader of the Palestinians for many, many years without any official election. He was elected, I think, about 13 years ago for a 4-year term, and just carried on and on and on and on. So there is a lot of work behind the scenes to move him to one side so that things can move ahead. So just looking at Britain's attitude, changed attitude to Israel, this was back in June when Boris Johnson was still in his position, and he was Foreign Secretary, wasn't he? He was urging the UN Human Rights Council, which is so anti-Israel, he was saying to them, look, you've got to change. It can't go on like this, and Britain won't support the Human Rights Council if they continue to just constantly slander Israel and criticise Israel. And in fact, the Americans shortly after this withdrew their membership of this organisation, which is so totally biased. But it's interesting, there was Britain standing up for Israel. And also in June, of course, Prince William paid his visit to Jordan, to Israel, to the PA, and he was the ideal person for the job. He impressed all the different parties, and they made a very deep impression upon him. When he came back, he vowed that it was his lifelong ambition to make peace in the Middle East. Now, what role he might play, we don't know, but it was interesting. Here is Britain casting her lot in with Israel and realising that there has to be some solution to the problems that are there. And Britain sees Israel as a target market. She has been boosting business there. It is growing, and this report is back in December, but as it said here, exports to Saudi Arabia are a few $1 billion higher, but Israel also has much to offer Britain that the Saudis can't. Israel exported to Britain to the tune of $5 billion, dollars that is. Israel has important technological innovations, and the two countries share important intelligence information as well. And there's no doubt the past few years under Cameron and under May that Israel is a key market for British exporters. And the relations between Israel and the United Kingdom have grown much closer. And increasingly so, Israel has wanted to do many things with Britain, but has not been able to do it because Britain is a part of the EU, and the EU isn't favourable generally to Israel. And so the Israelis are looking forward to Britain leaving the EU so that they can do far more together. So let's skip these over. As far as the young lions are concerned, United States, Canada, India, Australia, New Zealand, they all have strong links to Israel as well as to the region. Mr. Trump and the declaration to move the embassy, which came to pass in May, that was a big step after many, 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 many years of presidents postponing such a move. Trump caused it to happen. It caused a lot of outcry, but again, it shows that a different relationship which America has with Israel under Trump, and so a much more friendly person. And he's also contemplating upgrading Israel's military status. America does have a base in Israel where it prepositions equipment ready for any trouble in the Middle East, and Trump is proposing to elevate Israel to one of there are 6 major non-NATO allies, and he's proposing to make Israel a member of that very exclusive club, number 7. And he's also promised that the Mediterranean fleet will have a permanent presence in the Israeli ports of Haifa and Ashdod. So again, quite a change, especially from Obama, that this attitude to Israel and the importance of Israel to America is something which is growing and growing. And he's proposing to increase the munitions which are stacked in Israel, pre-positioned in Israel, so that if there is any war, Israel won't face the situation as it has in the past of running out of ammunition for the American equipment that she uses. India is another fascinating link, because we know that the D-Downs traded with India and brought their stuff to Tyre. And these two nations, quite different nations, but on either side of this power block of Pakistan and Iran, they see each other as helpers together. Two countries that can really develop trade and develop security by working together. So Modi, the Indian Prime Minister, visited Israel in 2017, and Netanyahu went to India at the beginning of this year. And both visits were an outstanding success. We're supposed to be finished, aren't we? Yeah. Right. Well, Saudi prince came to Britain. He's very ambitious. He wants to develop this huge area, huge free trade area, because he wants to diversify away from oil. He wants Israeli help and American and Egyptian and Saudi and Jordan help to develop that. So we shall see what happens. So let me just skip to the end. Britain's just opened a base in Bahrain. So that's a fascinating thing. Her emphasis on putting troops east of Suez as she withdraws troops from Germany. She plans to put them in this region here. So, yeah, we'll skip to there. So, we live in such wonderful times, and we have to keep abreast of these events as best we can. We can't know precisely what is going to happen, but we have to be very confident that God is in control, and the angels will work out everything so that everything drops into place. And so we look for the coming of our Lord Jesus to bring that house which we've been looking at in our talks this week, that God is building, that New Jerusalem. To be part of that is something so wonderful, that the God in heaven who controls all things has opened our eyes to these wonderful things. So